We're joined by Lara Bitar, editor-in-chief of The Public Source, a Beirut-based independent media organization. Thanks so much for being with us. These last 2 days, Lara, have been unprecedented. You have the shock of Tuesday when all of these pagers exploded, killing 12 people, injuring close to 3,000. And then yesterday, more explosions and walkie-talkies, and not clear what other electronic devices. The total 37 dead, something like 3,500 people injured. Can you describe the situation on the ground right now?
Good morning. So, as you can imagine, the events of the past 2 days have caused a lot of panic, a lot of fear, and to a large extent, paranoia, which was aided by disinformation campaign to a large extent. Over the past couple of days, or at least yesterday, for the most part, people were receiving messages over different WhatsApp groups, on social media platforms, that any and every electronic device can be detonated by the Israelis. So people were scared of using their cell phones. People were hearing that even kitchen appliances were exploding, solar panels, laptops, and so on. Thankfully, for the most part, this turned out to be a disinformation campaign, and it was not really materializing on the ground as was being reported across different channels. That's maybe the only solace from the events of the past couple of days, where we saw civilian areas and civilians being targeted. This has been widely reported in the Western press as a sophisticated campaign that targeted alleged Hezbollah operatives. But the reality is that for the most part, these explosions were occurring in civilian areas, in vegetable markets, in the supermarket, and the funeral, as you mentioned. And that's on one hand, but also on the other, not everybody who's carrying these pagers and these walkie-talkies is a Hezbollah fighter, nor were any of them on the combat field or on the front lines in the southern part of the country. It's very important to note that Hezbollah is not just a resistance group or a militant group. Hezbollah is also a political party here in Lebanon that is represented in parliament, and Hezbollah also runs and operates several large civil institutions. So we saw medical personnel, healthcare workers being killed and injured and maimed by these explosions. We saw children. We saw even the Iranian diplomat. So this was an indiscriminate attack that made the Lebanese population feel that anyone can be targeted at any point, anywhere in the country.
Well, Lara Bitar, if you could respond, give us a sense of what you expect Hassan Nasrallah to say today when he speaks at 5 p.m. Beirut time. You've suggested that this might be the very early stage of a much larger and much bigger war that has the potential to implicate the entire country. What are you expecting in terms of a response from Hezbollah?
It's very difficult to anticipate what the Secretary General will be saying today. But one thing is clear, at least to my mind and to many who are following very closely what's been happening in Lebanon. It seems that the Israeli government has already taken an action, a decision to escalate, to wage a full-scale war on all of Lebanon. And it seems to me that it doesn't really matter what Hezbollah decides to do at this point and what form of retaliation the party engages in, that the genocidal Israeli government has made up its mind to launch a full-scale war on all of the population. And I think the 2006 war between Israel and Lebanon can give us some significant clues as to what could potentially happen. So in 2006, 2006, which was a war that lasted about 33 or 34 days, Israel started off by cutting communication lines. That was the first thing that it did before launching a wider scale war on the rest of the country. And it seems like this is what it's doing yet again, cutting the communication lines, and not just of Hezbollah members, but for military personnel, for paramedics, for aid workers, doctors, and so on, causing a lot of disorientation, a lot of chaos, a lot of panic, and then this would be acting as a prelude to something that could potentially be much bigger and much scarier.
Lara Bitar, I'd like to ask you about what the response has been from different political parties in Lebanon to these widespread attacks. Let's just go to Lebanese parliamentarian Mark Dow, who spoke to the BBC earlier today. This is what he had to say.
The reality is Lebanon has been suffering for the past 11 months from the war in Gaza, economically, financially, but also because we had some unilateral actions by Hezbollah as well to start bombing from South Lebanon. We're talking to Hezbollah and telling them, you need to take all your decisions within the institutions of the state. Acting as a rogue unilateral actor on the military front is causing all of Lebanon damages because of Israeli aggressions, their genocidal war, and their lack of respect for the rules of war or even for crimes against humanity.
So, Lara, if you could respond to what Mark Dow said and whether this is a widespread belief, the fact that Hezbollah is operating unilaterally and that it should not be. It should be working within the imperatives and desires of the Lebanese state.
So Lebanon is split between two camps. On one hand, you have Hezbollah supporters who believe that we have a moral, ethical, political duty to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza and also in the West Bank. Hezbollah scholar Amal Saad referred to this as anticipatory self-defense and as military solidarity. We can roughly estimate that about half of the country or so supports this operation and this campaign that was initiated by Hezbollah on October 8th. And on the other hand, on the second camp is fiercely in opposition, not only to this operation, but to Hezbollah in general. And they are using the war of the past 11 months as a means to weaken Hezbollah, to attempt to strip the resistance group from its weapons, to demoralize its supporters. The second camp has been consistently lobbying the international community to exert additional pressure on the militant group. So right now the country is not really unified, but in the aftermath of the two terrorist attacks that took place on Tuesday and then on Wednesday, we saw for the very first time wide condemnation across the board in Lebanon, but also for the first time to some extent in the international community.